Bubby.
All right, here we are with another conversation between women, and it's Mercury retrograde, and yeah, our technology is experiencing all of it. Well, do you want to start today, or you want me to jump in? What do you got something to say?
Well, I'm curious that you mentioned before we started recording that it's been an interesting couple of days, and I'm curious why that is, if you want to elaborate.
I mean, nothing really crazy intense or anything is happening any more intense than the last like 8 months have been of being pregnant. But something really interesting that's been happening for me is I don't know if I talked about this in the last episode, that I've been feeling a lot of fear around like giving birth and all this stuff, like just really intensely feeling fear. And it's interesting to me because one, I'm not really a person who feels fear like really palpably. Like my thing is when I get into fear, I go into like management mode. Like, okay, let's like assess the risk. Let's like, I like deal with the issue. And it doesn't ever really get to the feeling like intense stage where I'm feeling like I'm going to have like anxiety or like maybe a panic attack or something like that. But I've been feeling that this last couple of months, and I mean, over the whole pregnancy, but the last couple of months, I kind of had a break in the middle, and now it's been kind of creeping back in. And so I met with my mentor, teacher, friend, and wanted to talk to her about it because obviously I need to clear this stuff out before I go into labor and I freak out. I don't want that to happen. And so I was talking with her, and my feeling on the whole thing, because with my daughter, when I was pregnant with her, and granted, I didn't know anything because I had never had a kid before, and now I know like what's going to happen. But with my daughter, I really, around 7 months, I got like this little inkling of fear. And it was like, there was a couple of like little things, but really the only big thing was I was afraid the cord was going to be around her neck. And since I was having an unassisted home birth, I went into like management, like what do you do if the cord's around the neck? And so it turned out that the cord was around her neck, and we had prepared for that. And so my friend just removed the cord before she came all the way out. No big deal. So I've been kind of like dealing with all these fears in that way. Like, am I meant to look at these? Like, what is it? Because like one of the fears is really irrational, like that I'm going to have a baby doll, like a actual baby doll is going to come out of me. Like, that's like really silly. So I can like write that off. Right. But then there's other fears like that, all the way to the extreme that I'm going to die or something. Right. So there's just all this stuff. And it's like, well, like, I don't want to die. Like, I don't want to deal with that. Like I got a kid to raise already. Like, how do I deal with that situation? And so I was talking to my mentor and about this whole thing. And my feeling about it was maybe this isn't my fear. And when I started going into that, it was really clear to me that this is the baby's fear. And so I was like, okay, maybe the baby's afraid to die, like, because now the baby's going to incarnate into bodily form, and death is a thing, right? Like when you're just a spirit, you're eternal, but whenever you're a human, you're mortal. And so I started looking at that, and I didn't say anything to her about it whenever I met with her. I just kind of was telling her about my fears, and she stopped me and she was like, do you think that this is the baby's fear? And I was like, well, actually, yeah, I do. And like, I don't want to just like put all the blame on the kid, but like, I kind of don't feel like this is my shit. So, and then this interesting thing came up, because she was like, my thing was the baby's afraid to be born because it doesn't want to die or whatever, or it had a bad experience in a past life and doesn't want to be born. But then what she came out with, of course, is something that I didn't expect. And she said, you have to deal with this, or your baby is going to be an adrenaline junkie. Your baby is addicted to adrenaline right now. And if it gets born in this way, you're going to have hell to pay, especially in the beginning. You're going to have a screaming, awful baby in the beginning, and it's going to be horrible because this baby is addicted to this feeling already. And she was asking me, what does the baby do when you get into this fear thing? And this baby's just like active all the time, and when I'm in the fear thing, obviously there's like tension and the baby's active as well. And she's like, this adrenaline that you're feeling when you feel, we went through what I actually feel physically. and it's like, can't breathe, you know, like anxiety's up. I really have to work hard to like talk myself off the ledge, you know, like it's okay. Like you're in a human body, everything's fine. Like, you know, and so she's telling me this, and I'm like, oh, that's really not what I was thinking, but that's really interesting. And so then fast forward, we talk about this whole thing about it being like that I need to deal with this stuff like right now, not project how I want the birth to be, but like right now, like feel the feelings of how I want to feel, and not like envisioning the future, like just deal with right now and feeling those feelings and holding that vibration. And or the consequences are I have a junkie baby who's like addicted to adrenaline and either becomes like a drug addict or is like somebody who jumps off of like towers or something, you know, crazy. And these are like the things we think of when we think of like adrenaline junkies. But then when I got off the call with her, I really started thinking about this and realizing that I am an adrenaline junkie. Like I have been an adrenaline junkie. It's different for me. When I was younger, like in my early 20s, it was very like, yeah, I'm in a mountain bike and like I'm not wearing a helmet and like gonna crash into stuff and, you know, whatever. I was always doing stuff like that. Going on extreme hiking trips, whatever, really pushing my body. But then the other way that it shows up for me, like that was a small way that it showed up in the spectrum of my life, but really how it shows up for me in my life is like I love to party. Like I don't like partying for me is not like doing drugs and drinking now. It's just like socializing, but I love to party, and I get so high from like a girl party. Like, I mean, really high where like it takes me 2 days to have to calm myself down. That's an adrenaline rush, right? Like it's a drug for me. And then, you know, there's all these ways like this. And then the other thing too is like the fighting in my mind. Like I've always done this my whole life, and it's not so bad now because I've really worked on it. But I mean, I'm like, I'll like just go, you know, all the way out fighting in my mind, like physically, like, you know, like combating somebody in my mind, this whole thing. And I'm getting this total high from it. Right. And, you know, thinking about when I was pregnant with Wilela, I was literally she was born on Monday. The Friday before she was born, I was in a martial arts class teaching women how to fight. And I was like on a woman strangling her as she flipped me off. Like we're like showing this demonstration. And I'm like 3 days from giving birth, and like my belly is huge, and she like throws me on the floor. Like I did that my whole pregnancy with her, right? Like that is like, you know, yelling and screaming and like, yeah, getting women pumped up. That's like my adrenaline high, right? So it was this whole huge realization that like I am actually an adrenaline junkie. And my mom was totally stressed out with me when she was pregnant with me. And she says that all the time. And she says now, don't get stressed out. Don't get stressed out, because I was a stressed out mom and you're just, you know how you turned out. And I'm just like, what is that supposed to mean? But like, she never wants me to get stressed out when I'm pregnant. And it's just this whole piece got put together. I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. And I don't know. Yeah. So I've just been kind of like mulling that around in my head and realizing that, you know, like, I mean, I've been realizing this way that my nervous system is hardwired, and it's really easy for me to get up, and it's really hard for me to come like back down to like earth level. And yeah, now I kind of have this whole other piece of why that is. And it's so really cool and interesting. And yeah, so I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I have been spending a lot of time meditating. I can tell you that.
That's probably a good start.
Yeah.
That's great. You know, I don't know if you listened to Anne Ortley this past week, but like she was talking about, this is the week when things are revealed to us, right? Or that maybe that was last week.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting, like hearing what you're saying. I want to take it in a totally different direction. But when you were starting to talk about it, my first thought was like, yeah, it's your babies, because I finally recently had some, I don't know how it came up, but it was some awareness where that clicked into place. Cause I have been a chronic self beater upper, whatever you want to, like, I've always been super hard on myself. I'm one of those people that, you know, therapists and friends and mentors and perpetually telling me like, wow, you're really hard on yourself, you know, and I never heard it. But anyway, so in relation to this, in the context of my daughter's birth, birth, I felt like I blamed myself for so many things, because I also had an unassisted home birth. And when I was pregnant, I remember at the end of my pregnancy, I was talking to a midwife, and I think she was asking me, if I had any fears or how I was feeling, or we were just talking about something. And I mentioned that I was nervous about like the actual journey through the birth canal. I was like, I'm afraid of that part, like for my baby. Like I can visualize or like somatically experience like what that process is. And I'm like terrified for her, for this baby. Like the thought of me going through the birth canal is like totally panic inducing, So I was like, she was like, oh, that's weird. That's interesting. Like I've never heard that before. It made so much sense to me. So of course, then I'm, in labor, and my daughter is crowning and then goes back in, and I can like feel her go up. And I totally went into like, I got freaked out. I remember distinctly feeling so much fear in that moment of like, this baby has to come out. She went back up. She has to come out, And so I just like bore down and pushed her out. And because it was a forced exit, totally tore me up. And because of that, I had to go to the hospital and get stitched up. Like the series of things that happened because of that. And for me, it destroyed me, and it totally devastated me. And then I was like, so mad at myself that I had destroyed my own experience for no reason. For years, it was like, because I got scared, like pansy ass, you got scared kind of thing,
You pussy.
And it just occurred to me, like within the last few weeks, it's like, that was maybe her. I may have been feeling her fear around that. And I've been beating myself up all this time about the fact that I got scared and I pushed her out and I ruined the birth and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, yeah, that all happened. And, I felt the fear and I took on the fear, but maybe it wasn't my fear. Maybe she was freaked out. And that's why at the end of pregnancy, I was like tuning into this, like, man, I'm totally freaked out to go down that tiny little space,
Yeah.
Like, so I totally get that. That makes so much sense to me, because I feel, I do feel that was hers. I mean, I don't know. I also do have a thing about tight spaces. So there's that piece, but just the awareness like that could have been her fear or in some way coming through.
Right.
And the other piece about that for me, which is where I'm going to totally detour here, is that also a couple weeks ago, so maybe that realization was like a couple months ago, but then more recently, I was getting this massage, and my massage therapist is so incredible. She's just started doing like biofield tuning fork work. And so it's like, she already has like this whole skill set, and she's amazing, and she's so intuitive, and she can like knows how to work everything. Oh my God, she's so good. And then she adds this like sound energy healing to it, and it's just like next level. And so I got this massage from her and I was like venting, and there was just so much stuff. And she gives me this book, and she's into astrology, and she loaned me this book of hers called Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller. Highly recommend this book. And she was like, you need to know what your North Node is. And I've gotten, readings of various forms. And I think I've gotten my astrology chart, my birth chart read, but everybody reads it differently and focuses on different things and sees different things. So she was saying like, you got to, what's your North Node? You got to know what your North Node is. It's the North Node of your moon. So I got this book from her, and I eventually sat down to read it. And it's maybe like 20 pages or something. And it's all the different ways that this particular piece of your chart shows up in your life. And for me, I have my North Node in Aries. And what that means is that I was born without my own identity, without my own like individualized energetic field. And so I just like take on whatever I experience from other people, and I will very easily put somebody else at my center instead of me living in my center. And talk about like you're saying, clicking pieces together. For me, I spent the first like 10 pages of this book just laughing at myself. Everything she said, I was like, oh my God, that's it. It's like domino effect of putting all these pieces together and understanding, like really structuring and contextualizing like everything that I've ever felt and known about myself, but didn't quite have the words or the way to understand what exactly it was. And so this way of expressing it is like, especially in intimate relationships or close relationships, I will like jump in, be like, we're one thing, because I'm just going to put you at my center, and then we're just going to be like the same thing. And so that's what my natural experience is, because I'm like in past lives, she even talks about past lives, like why you come in like this. Like, so in past lives, I have been at service constantly. And when I could make other people happy, I reaped the rewards of that. And so it was this mutually beneficial experience. And I learned how to be loving and generous and all these things. But this life, I'm not supposed to do that anymore. And I've always known that. I came in like as a toddler saying like, I'm my own person. You know, I was like a 3-year-old. My mom's like, I don't know where that came from. I don't know why you ever said that. It was like, because I knew. Yeah. I knew that I had to differentiate in this life. And I look at my life and I see that's all I've ever tried to do is differentiate myself. But it was always this very messy, kind of angsty, antagonistic way of doing it, because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know how to do it. But so what I realized in the context of pregnancy and having a baby and then having a kid was like, no wonder it was so excruciating for me. Like, no wonder I took on the fear, whether that was my fear or her fear, you know, in labor. Like, you're sharing a body. So like, you're already one. And then energetically, I'm going to take this being and put that being at my center. And so then so then she's born, and then she's this other being. And then I put her at my center. And then I just completely cease to exist in any way whatsoever. But then there's this part of me that recognizes that I'm here to differentiate. And so then I'm just like, all the time. But it was just like massive puzzle piece putting together. And so interesting to see in the context of relationships, like how to like be in relationship and to closely monitor it and to be like, where is my center? I put my center inside of myself. I feel I am at my center, and there is no one else who's in my center. And the experience, it's an immediate energy shift, and it's like a completely different thing. So I don't know, that was just super fascinating. And it's interesting in the context of pregnancy, because you're literally sharing a body, but you're also differentiated people, individual souls, spirits, however you want to think about it. And with different agendas and different purposes, paths, and different ways of relating to energy. And yet, because of the nature of the intimacy of it, you're also like totally fused and overlapped.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're growing a human in your center. Like in the center, there's literally an alien there growing. And then, yeah, the whole thing of, you know, I remember when my daughter was a baby, and I would accidentally call her Cameron all the time, like my own name. Like I would call her Cameron all the time. And I just thought, wow, this is so interesting. And I mean, it was because there was no differentiation, right? Like she had been growing in my body, and I could see her as like a little me and relate to her as that way. And, you know, pregnancy and mothering is a total trip, especially in the beginning. It's like, what is happening? So yeah, I can totally relate to the motherhood piece of that, you know, being so connected. And it's interesting now because my daughter is, you know, I'm kind of pushing her out, you know, farther, and she's having a hard time with it. And it's interesting how like our family dynamics are changing around it. And it started with basically like, I just couldn't share a bed with her anymore as soon as I got pregnant. Like, and I didn't expect that because I just thought she would sleep with us until she was like 30 or something. And I was totally okay with that. I mean, I basically slept with my mom, not like consistently every night, but I would go crawl in my mom's bed until I was an adult, you know, like even now when I go back home, we hang out in my mom's bed, like, you know, just like hang out and talk to each other and whatever. And it's like, I'll take a nap in my mom's room or whatever. It's like one of the few ways that we ever bonded. So I just always assumed like, you know, my daughter would just be in our bed. But as soon as I got pregnant, it was just no, I can't be touched. I can't sleep with anybody. I've been sleeping on the couch by myself because I can't even like be on the same floor as my family. I'm like, no, I need my own space. And so I've been slowly like, kind of pushing her out, and she's learning all these new things. Like this year she learned to ride a bike, and she's done swimming lessons, and she's done her first solo camping trip with her dad. And like, like just all these little things that she's made more friends this year than she's ever had. And so she's learning all these things. And how it shows up is that like she's just, I don't know, like it's just like she's just gets totally crazy sometimes. Like she's just so hyperactive. And I'm like, this is an influence of all those bad kids, like every other kid is bad, just like they're just like teaching her all this hyperactivity crap. And I had a conversation with my partner about it last night because, it's just sometimes it's a lot. Like she's constantly on just, and she's always been that way, but she's just way more energy now, and it's really intense. And she's not like, she's been sleeping in her own bed for a month now. And she's just started in the last like week and a half, like waking up in the middle of the night and like screaming and waking everybody up. Like, I need somebody in here, and it's like, no, that's just not going to work. And so the way her dad and I have been dealing with it has been different. Like he goes in there and just sleeps with her. And I talk to her from the downstairs. I'm like, you're okay. You're safe. You can do this. You got to learn. Like, I'm like trying to talk her through it. So that's creating tension between my partner and I, because I'm like, you're the problem. Like, stop going in there, And so it's just been really interesting to watch that. Like, and I was telling him, like, my job, I'm the boundary for her. Like, I'm her boundary. That's it. I'm a mom. That's my job, is to be the boundary. And she's supposed to push up against me, but I'm supposed to keep pushing her out. And then she comes back and I push her out and she goes to you, and then she comes back. It's like this whole thing, right? Like it's supposed to happen. This is the way it's supposed to work. And it's really not fun. It's hard, but also like I gotta push her out. I'm like, you can still live in my house, but you gotta have some personal space here. So it's interesting, the one becoming two again, and seeing her become her own human. And yeah, she's sassy. We were at a friend's house doing a cider yesterday, pressing cider, and I don't remember what she said, but she was like, oh, I told her she needed to wipe her feet off before she went in their house or whatever, because we were outside and she's in the mud. And she's like, well, I don't have any mud on my feet, so I'm not going to wipe my shoes or wipe my feet off. And she just like walked away, and they were like, "Who? That was a little sassy." I was like, yeah, pretty much. Everything is sassy, and it's great. I want her to be that way, just not to me. Yeah. I want her to be that way to everybody else, but
yeah, right. If only they were differentiated ways of being. Yeah. That only works if you're like me and you're born with no center. And then like with each person, it was funny actually, because one of the things that she wrote in the book was that people like the North nodes and Aries will be people who like very quickly pick up other people's body movements or gesture, body language and gestures, and very easily adopt accents. And like, wow. I've always had an aptitude for foreign languages. I go to like visit my friend in Tennessee when I was in college, and within like 24 hours was developing a Southern twang. I talked to you and I started saying y'all, and I started like my accent totally changes. I'm so aware of that every time I hang out with you. And I'm like super self-conscious about it, but I try to like.
I've never noticed that. That's funny.
That's good. But I noticed like I'll be hanging out with my boyfriend and he like will like sit back in his chair in a certain way, and I'll like immediately do it. And I'm like, no, I was sitting like this and I was perfectly fine just sitting like this. I don't need to do that. But anyway, so yeah, that's just funny to me. But with the kids being differentiated, it's like I don't intend to, but I see how, it's a great quality in one way because I can like interact with anybody. I'm malleable and adaptable, but at the same time, like, wouldn't it be nice if we could just like hold who we were in all situations? And it's interesting. I find that as I just work with this, and I think it's been like a week since I read this book, and the more that I work with this, like I'm working with it constantly, like all day, every day, the more I feel so clear and solid in myself. And there's none of that like crazy mind chatter of, you know, what I should be doing or how I, you know, what I think is needed in this situation to curb my daughter's behavior or to deal with a particular, you know, thing that's happening. It's just like, my job is to honor my gut impulse. If I don't have one, I'm allowed to sit quietly and make a choice later when I feel clear, and I'm allowed to take that time. And I need to be at my center and nobody else gets to be at my center. And so I just keep holding that line. And then suddenly I can see myself as a differentiated being from her. And then I'm like not nearly as triggered, and I can just like let her things be her things. And like she can then have the space to do with herself and her experience whatever she needs to, which has been so liberating for me. Because I've read different things throughout the years that have sort of given tools for how to do that with your kid, but because I was like constantly entangled, like I was never able to. So now that I have more of the space, it's like, I mean, I could do it in bits, but it couldn't stick. And so this is very exciting for me.
Do you see
But
with like when you're doing that, when you're like trying like moving back to your center with your daughter, do you see how like do you see a change in her? Like does she get more in her center, or like what does that look like between your relationship?
yeah, she actually, I have to read what her north, I'm really curious what her north node is, but she responds really well. She responds so well. Like I'm often surprised. And I guess I hadn't thought about it in the context of like where her center is, but I think, you know, we have the adrenaline junkie thing in our family too. And there's been a lot of volatility and like intensity. And I can see that as soon as I am like clear in my center, she doesn't have to react. And so she doesn't have to like throw out flares or whatever, you know, she
Mm-hmm.
can just, she's much more able to manage. And it's interesting too, because Mercury retrograde tends to be like a really regressive, explosive, aggressive kind of time for us. And there've been moments where I'm like, oh, right, this is a Mercury retrograde. You know, I can see the behaviors, but because I'm holding myself in my center so much more strongly and I'm engaging with, totally like with different energetics, she's moving through things in a way that she wasn't before, where she's more willing to have awareness of her actions and more willing to have awareness of her words and her tone, and to recognize when I'm like addressing her about something, and to hear that I'm not yelling and I'm not attacked. Cause she'll often respond to me as if I'm like fighting her. And I'm like,
Yeah, she
that's not what's
assumes.
happening here. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not fighting. I'm just stating what's happening, or telling you what I need, or telling you what the situation is and explaining this thing to you. And you're like reacting to me as if I'm yelling at you, and I'm not yelling at you. And so now it feels like she's more willing to accept that or see that or be in tune with it. So I guess in a way it is like being more centered, because she's more okay, like being in herself, I guess, and like
Yeah.
not having to, because reaction is like, I got to get out of myself. I got to like throw things out,
Right.
versus just like being okay with what's in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that might be a apt way to describe that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like a spin-off of that too. Something else that's been going on with me is, so I like, you know, the baby's coming soon. And so the naming thing has to happen. And just for like context for our listeners, I named my daughter, and the way it was, like, I knew that she was a new template, and that I was not going to give her a man's name. I was not going to give her my own last name, which is a man's last name, a man's name that was given to me and has really no meaning, because that name, it literally means nothing to me. And with my partner, I wasn't willing to give his name. And at that time I was super in like the radical feminist, like I'm my own woman, and I was very aggressive about it. And the way that I dealt with it was I just told him, she's not going to have your last name. She has her own name. And I felt very strongly that was, I mean, part of it was my ego, and part of it was that she was a new template. And I felt very strong in that. And it created kind of a situation of tension between us. And so I was like, I'm just not going to tell you what her name is until the minute she comes out. And I will not sign a birth certificate that has your last name on it, period. That was my hard line approach to it, or whatever. And you know, whatever, we got through that. Here we are almost 5 years later, and another kid is happening. And so this is coming up for me again, right? Because the same thing has happened. This baby's name is revealed to me. And in my family and the culture that I grew up within, while the children are given the father's last name, the women name the children. That's how it is. In Sam's family, his father named all of the kids. He came up with all of the names, and he has the last name and all of that stuff. And, that's just not how it's done in where I came from. And it's also not spiritually what I feel like is right. I feel like as a woman, part of my power of being divine feminine is the power of naming. And there's like all kinds of spiritual texts that say this, like in the Bible, it even says like, no man can give a woman her name, you know, like there's a whole spiritual aspect to this and I feel really strongly about it from like a human egoic perspective as well. And so, but like in the last, I don't know, probably the last month, I felt really strongly that I wanted to tell him what the baby's name was. And I told my daughter what the baby's name was. And I really wanted to tell him. And I sat down with him. It was about a month ago. I sat down with him at the dinner table and I said, so I'm really having this strong feeling that I want to tell you what the baby's name is. And before I could say anything else, he said, all I ask is that if it's a boy, it has my last name. And so it shut me down. Like I completely shut me down. And one of the things that happened whenever I had my daughter is that I said to him, if we have a boy in the future, I'll give him your last name. It was like, I just said it to get him off my back kind of thing, you know, like, but I said it. And we didn't know before she was born that she was a girl. I knew, but like, we didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I also told him like, when she's grown and she decides if she wants to take on your last name, I'm totally willing for her to change her name. Like I'm still am, that's true. Like if she wants to change her name from what the name that she was given at birth, I don't see any problem with that. Well, so I told him this and it shut me down, whatever, and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm just not going to tell him. And I'm going to do the same hard ass thing. Like I'm not signing any birth certificate that has his last name on it, whatever. So then I go to my mentor and I tell her this. I'm like, I would like to know how you see this situation and how you would deal with it. And of course, like any good teacher, she doesn't tell you what you want to hear. So she was just like, and her and I have talked about names, like my Cherokee name. Like I talked to her about like that I didn't want there's like a man who names you in our tribe, and I didn't want him to name me. I have my own name. And she told me like, no man can give you a name. Like that name is your name, and he doesn't validate that name for you. If he doesn't choose that name for you or doesn't consecrate that name for you, that means nothing, right? So I'm thinking, yeah, she's going to be on my side, right? And she says, the first thing out of her mouth is, why can't the father have a hand in naming the child? Why can't the father have, come up with the name or whatever? And I was just like, okay, well, that's not what I was expecting, but, and so I started giving her my whole spiel or whatever. And, she gave me her view on it or whatever. And she just told me to just sit with it and just see or whatever. And so I have been, that was like a week ago. And I've been like, just sitting with it, just still feeling really strongly that like, no. And I have like Taurus lit up in my chart, my birth chart. So I'm like, no. When I say no, there is no convincing me otherwise. Like I am like hardcore a bull. Like, yeah, there's just no changing my mind. I'm very stubborn. And so there was just no way I was going to change my mind. Well, last night, my partner brought this up to me. He was just like, I really wish that I could name this baby. And I was just like, really like, no, that's not going to happen. So we had this whole conversation, which was totally chill. Like I didn't get all pissed off. Like neither of us got all pissed off. It was fine. But the whole time in my mind, my ego's sitting here going like, fucking weak argument. Like, no, da, 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 like, that's not going to happen. Weak ass, like, get a better argument. You know, like, I'm just like in my mind. And so my other like little angel self is like, just calm down. Don't say anything that you're thinking right now. Like, just like, shut up. So I'm like going through this battle in my mind while we're talking, and really like wanting to be open, and also knowing that I'm just not going to give this child his last name. And, you know, a lot of his reasoning is very, as I see it, is very superficial, and it's very like, it's very patriarchal, and he doesn't see that. And like, I'm coming from it from this spiritual point, and I also have an ego, you know, my ego's involved as well. But so it was really interesting. And so I just went to bed, like nothing got resolved, and I just went to bed last night thinking like, I'm just not gonna do that. Like, that's just not. And I told him like, I can't do something that's not in alignment for me. Like, I just cannot do it. It's impossible for me to do something that doesn't feel right. Like, I cannot do it at this point in my life. I just can't. And he said, well, that's how it feels for me too, and I can't, you know. And which, yeah, I could argue about that, because I see him do stuff he doesn't want to do all the time, but like, I won't. And so I woke up this morning though, and this interesting thing like happened. I'm like sitting outside drinking my cacao drink, and I'm like meditating or whatever, and just like doing my morning thing of like getting in the zone. And I just felt all this space like move in around this issue. And what happened was, I finally was able to see that my power is not just in resisting, right? In the differentiation. Mm-hmm. My power is not in this forcing away, but like having the power of naming, bestowing that upon myself, feeling like that has been given to me by like that's a God-given thing, like a divine feminine gift that I am bestowed with. Part of that is I can say that I will share this name with you, or you can name this child, or, you know, there's some play in there where I can say like, you know, that's a power too, that I can say, okay, well, let's do this together, right? Instead of just me exerting my will upon the world. And so I was like, well, that's really interesting. Like, that doesn't seem like me at all. But I'm like going through this, like letting it play out, like thinking it through, and like letting the feeling come up of like what's happening, and just really having this strong feeling realization that, like, I think I mentioned this before, how my teacher said, like, the reason that I fight with my mom and like my mother-in-law, like, and I'm always just like, get out of here, is because I'm in their pool, I'm in their frequency, and fighting my corner instead of creating my own pool and having the whole thing. Well, it was kind of the same situation. Like, I'm like thinking, I'm being forced to do this. I'm being forced to give this child this name that I don't want to. And so I'm over here in this corner of that frequency field, fighting it out. Like, no, this is my space. This is the only power that I have, is to name this baby. This is the only power I have, and you are not taking it from me. And so feeling really offended, and not just offended, but actually violently attacked by it. Like, it's something that will completely make me not be able to breathe, and like make me just really want to run away from my partner. Like, I'll just be like, I'm going to pack up in the middle of the night. I'm going to leave, you know, like, it really is something that freaks me out. And so it's been interesting. I don't know what I'm going to do, but the fact that I am at this place now where I have space, like we talked about last time, of just like, that there are other options besides my way. And that maybe in like, even if I'm looking at this from like a human perspective of like trying to get my way, like maybe, you know, I'm mature enough now to say like, the way that I want it to be is peaceful. The way that I want it to be is harmonious. So like, in order to get my way of being like having peace in my home, then this is something that I don't know. I hate the word compromise. I really hate that word, but like, whatever other word we can insert there that doesn't feel like I'm, you know, whatever, betraying myself or something. But like, maybe that is power too, that I can hold this, you know, as divine feminine, you know, my job is to hold the sacred ring and to like hold the space of the family. And maybe this is a way that I do that. Like, you know, I don't know. It's interesting, and it's new, and it's just been today. But like, the fact that I even have this space to even consider that maybe there's another option is pretty unimaginable and mind-blowing for somebody as stubborn as myself.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I'm so grateful that you shared all of that. And it never ceases to delight me that where we line up, like every time we have these conversations, how parallel our lives, our internal processing of our life experiences are, while our life experiences are so completely unrelated.
Yeah.
Like there's such different, well, not completely, but just such different manifestations, but
Right.
how we are sort of touching in on these same energetics and processes. And it just, as you were talking like that, it came up before earlier in what you were saying around like the role of the divine feminine, the role of the female or the matriarch, maybe I didn't use that word, but and then it just came up again when you're saying like you don't want to use the word compromise, but this it's this idea of, oh, when your mentor was talking about, you know, like what's the matter if he names the baby, like giving, you know, the father participating, and that there's this piece, like it was making me think about leadership and how I had this this boss when I was in my early 20s, and he was like he was just a couple years older, and he was so good at delegating that and it never felt like he was like the boss delegating responsibility. It was just like he just had that way of like managing everyone and everything in this way where it was very low key, but very much like he took care of everything, and he had all the people to take care of all the things that were needed. But he even said it, I remember him saying at one point about how like a great leader delegates, and he was just like, he was happy to pass the buck off to somebody else. Like, I don't want to do that, you go do that. And not that that's our job, but just sort of that idea of like, it just made me think of leaders and how a good leader delegates, but this concept of of control. I was talking to a friend recently about like intimate relationships, especially in this idea of control, and how so many things can disguise themselves. how control can disguise itself as so many different things, and that it doesn't invalidate whatever stance or perspective or belief or conviction or whatever it is that you have, but that there might be more nuances to the situation than you're able to see at a given moment when you have your ego head stories going, and when you feel very clear and very strong about it, and that there is this way of being with something that like so deeply knows one, like your own, like when you so deeply know your own essence and who you truly are and what your true power is, that those types of things, like you can then like you're talking about space, like it's like you can span out, right, or whatever it's called,
yeah,
when you like extend the lens, and then you can see like and hold a bigger picture and an understanding of like what your role could be, or how big your role could be, or how much influence, like that it's not about controlling all the minutia and making it look a certain way or be a certain way, but like if you can hold the whole energetics of the whole family and the house and that space and that dynamic, that you are constantly, like you're saying, like here's your role with Walela, where you're, you know, she comes back to you and then you push her out, and she comes back and you push her out, and then she goes to Sam, and then it's this whole dance that, you know, you could look at that and be like, you know, you shouldn't be doing this, and it's supposed to look like this, and she is supposed to be in her own room, you know, like controlling the details of it versus recognizing like the energetics and the role that you all play and how the whole energy is moving, and how as it moves it shifts and changes and creates something else, but that it's not linear, because nothing is linear. And that's like the essence of the divine feminine, is that like it's not remotely linear. So there's that piece, which is just really beautiful to bring into awareness. And then the other thing that was coming up even earlier in the conversation was about how we had talked in the last episode about creating more space, and like you having whatever conflicts you're having with Sam, and that like you don't have to like address each one and like work each one out and like go after each thing as it happens, but just like recognizing what's happening and giving it time and just like letting it be and letting him have the space to work through his process. At least that was what I took from what you were describing. And I'm just totally seeing that in my own life experience of the last week, or I don't know, a few days. And it's really, really fast, or it's really interesting for me because, so this is like, I feel like this is way more personal than I've ever been on this podcast, but it just feels so, I'm having the awareness that like, I'm probably not the only woman who has this experience. And I don't think I am, but like in the context of sex with a man as a woman, I feel like the structure of relationships that we have sort of been programmed into, and like the whole, structure of our society, and just the way it is in the patriarchy, all that stuff like that we all experience and have internalized in our own various ways. Like what I've realized is that I have never been in a relationship without some like weird contorted power dynamics around sex. And like, it feels awful. And it's basically left me like feeling like, how do people enjoy relationships, Yeah. And so when I realized, like, I've been in this process of realizing that I very immediately put people at my center. Like I realized that the biggest problem that I was having in my relationship was that I had put him at my center unknowingly. And I was very much trying to like hold my own space. It was a challenge for me because I didn't have the mental framework, I guess, to understand what was happening and how to shift it. So now recognizing like I'm at my center has also taken this whole concept of 100% personal responsibility, like radical self-responsibility, to a whole new place and a whole new level for me. And it's come up in the context of sex in the last several days. And what I realized, and like, God bless Kim and Ami. I know you're like, I know you're not a follower, but she is a holistic sex and relationship coach for anyone who doesn't know about her. And she's very much, I've probably mentioned her on this podcast actually, because she's been a great influence and support in my life in the last few years. But she talks about, the dynamics of sex in the relationship, and how when that energy isn't flowing between partners, and it doesn't have to be like full on intercourse, but just when that sexual energy isn't flowing freely between partners, how it can kind of gunk up the field, and forgive me, Kim and Ami, if this is not actually what you would say, but what I took away from it is sort of that internalized understanding. And so I've been in this whole process of like having the awareness that I had to come back into my own as a sexual being. And that's been a long process for me. And the reason I bring this up is because what I realized at some point was that I had like through sex had lost any sense of self as differentiated that I had up until that point, and then got like to be sort of a jumbled mess. And then instead of being able to like see myself as this powerful, strong, capable, individualized woman that I know I am, like I could see myself in every area of my life and be like, I'm a badass and I'm rocking it. And this is great. And I'm loving myself. And it's like, I love the direction I'm going. I love the work I'm doing, the energetics, all this stuff. And then I would come to the relationship and just feel like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what to do about this. I'm like a jumbled mess. And just because I could immediately lost myself and got stuck in this like power dynamics, then I was trying to control, or just not, I was aware of the desire to control, but aware that that wasn't the choice I wanted to be making. And so then I just kept trying to create more space, to find the space for some new answer for me to start to exist or whatever. And eventually it took a couple months to realize was that I had denied this through insecurity and feeling vulnerable and various things. And I'm not like being hard on myself about this, but just realizing that I had once again denied myself as like who I am, which is partly a sexual being, and like, and just recreated like power dynamics that had been there in past relationships and through my relationships with men in general. And then, you know, just my concepts of like myself as a woman and men as men and their worth and power versus my worth and power and all that. So long story short, the point of this is that in the last few days, I had like a big shift around this and have been navigating this from a different space with what happens if I put myself at my center, and what happens if I look at whatever this apparent power play dynamic is that's happening between us, and I just put myself back at my center, and then I look at it through that lens, and then I see myself over here as a differentiated being from this person, and then from that place recognize like what I actually want in this situation and what I actually need and how I feel about this. And it's not about what I'm getting or not getting from him and what he's doing or he's not doing, and if there's an imbalance and blah, 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 and all this stuff, and realizing like focusing on all of those things isn't actually helping. You know, I mean, these things happen in like sexual relationships, like people's, you know, what they give and what they receive fluctuates, and it's different, and it's never like, it's not supposed to be tit for tat, you know, like right. It's a fluid, energetic experience. But realizing like how if I could so easily like lay out the specifics of things and be like, this is out of balance, and this is, you know, it's not supposed to be like this. I'm, you know, like, also Cameron and I have a book, have a book club, and we read Vagina by Naomi Wolf last year, which has been definitely on my brain. Highly recommend it for anybody listening. Especially the last chapter, The Goddess Array, if you're in a relationship. Or even if you're not, probably. But just having that awareness of, I'm like, no, but it's the divine feminine, right? And I'm the woman, and it's supposed to be me that's like worshiped and cared for, and my pleasure and my desire and like all that stuff. Like that's supposed to be the focus, because that's where the beauty and the pleasure is for everybody, right?
Yeah. And you'll like it too if you do it.
Right. So I'm like in my little ego headspace about that, not like vengefully, but just aware of that. And so then I never use the expression butt hurt, but you do. And I heard somebody else use it recently, and I really like it. I'm like getting butt hurt, and it's like the best way to say it, because that's really what it is. You're like, man, I'm like all butt hurt about that, but like obviously I should just get over it, and it's something else. You know? So realizing that like that whole kind of story that I was getting into around like the divine feminine and like what my right is and what I'm supposed to be receiving and what I'm supposed to be able to do and just the whole thing, that like that story, first of all, was not helping me feel better or get what I wanted. And second of all, it was such a limited approach to like the potentials for like what I'm capable of in terms of like taking care of myself and like holding my own space and knowing what my worth is, knowing what I need, and just being able to identify that and then address it in like really constructive and positive and productive ways, just in general. But I mean, I think in the realm of sexual intimacy, that's also really valuable. And then like just holding that space, and then like not addressing things as issues, but just holding enough space for that I also like had this experience of realizing like, no, I'm just at my center, and I know what I need, and I know what will serve the highest and best for me. And like, it's not an immediate problem, and it's like not actually a problem at all, but it's just something that like maybe takes time and allows space for things to like shift and change. And so as soon as I did that, I like felt so much better in myself. I felt like the whatever, you know, ego construct ideas of like whatever power imbalance there was that I thought there was between us, like completely vanished. And I realized that I was just like making up crazy stories.
Yeah.
Or like creating problems where there weren't any. And then was blessed with a couple conversations or interactions that were just very clearly indicating that like that I'm not alone in holding this space. And it seems like it's very easy for us to be like, this is how it is, and I have to have it this way because this is who I am and this is where my power is. And then just like try to hold that all by ourselves, when really like the other person that we're involved with, and whatever, you know, whatever level of friendship, intimacy, whatever that is, like there's always, when we're in relationship, we're always in relationship with somebody else with all of their stuff and all that they bring and all the uniqueness that they are and their way of perceiving things. And so like, you know, we can look at it as like, Sam's the patriarch and he wants to name my son
Right.
after him, and you know, and like I'm the divine feminine, I'm supposed to be the one who names, and like, and I know that you hold the awareness of all this, but
Right.
just like, you know, for the sake of the argument, like it's so easy to do that and to create, especially I think between men and women, because that's really been pushed on us, like that there is this negative power play versus like differentiated energy dynamic. And like, and in reality, if we actually always come back and hone in on like where our centers, bring our center into ourselves and hold our own energetics around it, and be willing to allow some space and give ourselves the chance to know like that our needs are going to be met in this, and that things aren't always what they seem, that there is actually so much more space. And as the woman, as the feminine, like that is the beauty of us, that we are expansive. That's our whole birthing process, is to open and expand and allow life to flow through us in the most easeful and beautiful, or maybe not always easeful, but like the most right way, whatever that is. I feel like that was a really long rant.
No, it brought up so much stuff. It's good because like it hit on so many things. And one of them is, I don't even know where I want to start with this, but so in the process of talking with my mentor, I also brought up this whole issue of like, you know, how am I gonna, I think I mentioned this to you last time, like how am I supposed to teach if this is my son that's going to be born, which I feel strongly that it's a boy. How am I supposed to teach? I can't teach him to be a man. Like, how am I supposed to do that? You know, like I can't do that. And then I was like, and how am I supposed to teach my daughter to be a woman even? Like, I'm still figuring it out myself. And, you know, she stopped me and she said, like, your job is not to teach. One, you're never going to know what divine masculine looks like. You have no idea, because we're at a loss right now for what divine feminine and divine masculine look like. Like, we don't have any idea in the world we live in today. It's all just new and coming up for us, like being remembered. And so, and I get that I can't teach him to be a man. Like, I get that. But then I was like, you know, how do I teach even my daughter to be like a strong woman or whatever, you know, and all of this stuff. And she said, well, the first thing is like, don't teach your daughter to be a woman. And I was like, what? Like, that's like so much like what I'm about is like being a woman. And she's like, you don't teach your daughter to be a woman because you're limiting her. You teach your daughter that she is divine feminine. And the thing with divine feminine is that it doesn't look one way. It's not linear. It doesn't look, my divine feminine and your divine feminine look different. And she was like, the circle, the sacred circle is the divine feminine. But where we move, like how we express that, how it manifests through us as individuals is different. So for me, femininity or being divine feminine looks totally different than, you know, a lot of other women. And she's like, you can't go read it in a book, like how to be divine feminine. Like you can't go and have somebody teach you what divine feminine is, like you have to ask to be shown that, and then you will embody it. Like that's how it works. And she's like, so you don't teach your daughter about what it means to be a woman, because you're limiting her to this small little human experience of I am woman, and you're limiting your son to I am man, instead of this huge expansive thing. And I can hear it, I can feel it when I say it, like divine feminine and divine masculine, like it feels so much bigger than man or woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and so then there's that aspect of it. And like, so if I can just get myself, and then, you know, it's about mirroring. And so another thing she said is, all I have to do is figure out divine feminine, like embody that, channel that, and then the divine masculine will show up in all the men around me, in my partner, in my son, in my brother, in my dad. Like divine masculine will show up if I just mirror divine feminine, because it's a balance, right? And which brings me to this whole thing of like this natural law of reciprocity. Like in nature, you can look everywhere and see reciprocity. Like there's always reciprocity. There's no give without a take. There's no take without a give. And that's something as humans that we aren't taught that. We're taught the opposite, like my toy, my this, my that, whatever, you know, this is mine, instead of like this back and forth thing. So it's hard for people to even experience this reciprocity, like what you're saying in a relationship, like there's a power trip, or like somebody's on their high horse or whatever. But if we can just be divine feminine and divine masculine embodied in however that shows up in the moment, then there will be a natural flow. I mean, there has to be, it's a law. There's a natural flow of reciprocity of, you know, you get what you need and I get what I need or whatever in a relationship. And yeah, like staying with your center and like knowing like what your needs are and being in deep communion with yourself, with God, your higher self, whatever you want to call it. If you're in deep communion with that, then yeah, it's like nothing can even challenge that, because you know, like, you know, the truth. And this is like back to the naming thing. And that's where I got to with that. It's like, if I remember hearing Oprah Winfrey say this one time, a long time ago, when I used to watch the Oprah show when I was a teenager. And she said, if you are something, you don't have to tell anybody that you are that thing, because everybody knows it. It's like, if you're a shaman, you don't go around saying, I'm a shaman, I'm a medicine man, da 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 da. Like other people in your community call you that because they see that in you, right? And it's the same kind of thing in this. Like you don't have to, you know, like me for years struggling, being like, I'm a woman, I'm going to be called a woman, and da 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 da, and like, call me a woman, like that's my name. And really owning that. I mean, that's part of the process. So I don't want to knock that. Like that's part of the evolution, but also where we're trying to get as women is to divine feminine, like what we actually are as embodied, like as spirit, like coming through these physical bodies. And yeah, when we get to that, we can just, it's like floating down the river again, just like, you know, going down the river and letting it all unfold before you. And it just feels to me so much more, every time I get to a little place of that, so much more expansive, so much more relaxing. And it conserves so much energy, because we don't have to waste all this energy. Like, you know, you're talking about like, okay, like, am I getting what I was, you know, what I need? Like, da, 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 like analyzing everything. So much energy gets spent doing this. And yeah, like managing things or controlling things or making sure things look just right. And instead of holding the big vision, you know, holding the big energy and then letting all the little things just work themselves out.
Yeah. What did you say right before floating down the river? Do you remember? There was something that you said that. Oh, well, it was talking, when you were saying, you know, you don't have to be, once you become it, then you don't have to tell people that you are it.
Right.
I think it's Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza talks about that, because he says, you know, people will be like, well, how do I know when I'm changing or when I'm going to change? He's like, the people who are doing it, like who are becoming it, they just stop talking about it because they are living it. They are being it.
Right.
And, yeah, I see that more and more in myself, I guess. Just in realizing that, like, that the process of coming into the divine feminine, Well, it's interesting because like your process of going through this thing with the name was like, you had really clear conviction and you were hell bent on like, this is it. And I had a thing, I think I've mentioned it on the podcast. I know I've talked to you about it personally, but around like a camp thing for my daughter and the whole, you know, situation that's happening with masking and all that stuff. And I got crystal clear in myself and realized, like, I called my boyfriend to talk about it because I knew he'd have a different perspective. Then I was like, maybe we'll just talk and see if I can shift something here. And like, and it was good to hear it. And because it was reinforcing of how I felt. Like, he had his own perspective and it was like, yeah, I knew that was going to be his perspective. And it doesn't change at all how I feel about this. I'm just so crystal clear. And I was holding that while also holding the awareness that like, I am like 1,000% clear in this. I have like no wavering, no doubt, no nothing. Like, I know that I'm super convicted about this. And I've been like looking for clarity for all these years in like any area, like anywhere, give me clarity, you know, like something where I know exactly what to do in this moment. And I was like, why am I doubting myself? Like, I have absolute clarity here. And maybe it's the wrong decision. Maybe there's better decisions or whatever, you know, air quotes, but this is like crystal clear. And my job, and this was reinforced by reading this Astrology for the Soul book about my North Node, my job is to honor with conviction whatever is coming up for me, like to just completely 100% love and honor myself and trust whatever arises, because my gut impulses are the truest indicator of like where I'm headed, what choice I need to make, where I need to go. And so knowing that, I mean, this was before I had read that, but I had this awareness, like if I hold this conviction and I live it out completely, then I honor it. And then I allow it to dissolve and I allow space for change and for something else to come in. And maybe in 3 weeks, I'm going to feel totally differently. And then when school comes in for the fall, I'll make a different choice. And that didn't really happen, but that's fine. Like, it shifted and it changed. I continued to make the same choice, but the energy around it and the reasons behind it, or the feelings of what will come as a result of the choice I made, are very different than they were like in the summer for camp. But I like knew that I wasn't going to get through it if I didn't honor what was happening then. So like, yes, it is part of the process. It is part of the process. The whole process is to own who we are and to live it out fully and completely. And I don't know if I've brought this up on the podcast. I've certainly mentioned it to a bunch of friends, but the poet Rainer Marie Rilke wrote at one point, I don't have the direct quote here, but basically like the whole purpose of life is to like live out everything. You live all of the questions, not trying to find the answers. You just live the questions. And then maybe one day through living the questions, you will live into the answers. And so it's this process like you must live and feel everything. That's the whole point of being here. And so if we are constantly denying any of those parts of ourselves, then we're like cutting those parts off or throwing them in the dark, or they become our shadows or whatever. And so if we just continue to live and honor everything that happens inside of us, then what's inside of us begins to learn that it is seen and valued and loved for what it is, and it is honored. So it begins to show itself to be seen and loved and honored. And if it's stuff that isn't in service to us, then it has the space to move out and release and move on, so that there's more space for something else. And as that happens, then we literally become more space, right? More space, less density. We become more spacious and we expand, and then we can more fully live out the expansiveness of who we are as these divine feminine beings. And I mean, it's the same for divine masculine too. Like, everybody is expansive, but just in the context of us talking about divine feminine in that way. And so I had a really cool experience today around this. Like you're saying, you know, you live out the divine feminine, and then that creates the space for the divine masculine to find you. And we went foraging this afternoon, my boyfriend and our kids and me, and so we go foraging, and I keep having this, and like what you're talking about, this mutuality, this reciprocity, it's also been something that's been coming up for me lately. But I keep having this experience where I'm like, oh, I'm going to go harvest this thing, or I'm going to go with people and forage, or we're going to whatever. And it's like, it's still in that from that, like, here's this thing, there's lots of it, I'm going to take it way of operating, right? With this like undercurrent awareness that's been growing through intention and effort over the last few years around like, I don't have a right to this. It's a gift and I can receive it and I can take in accordance with the generosity of the gift, but it's like, I'm not entitled to any of this. And so this is an unlearning and a relearning process. And I realize like we show up where we're going to harvest this fruit, and like he gets out, he gets his bucket, kids get the buckets, and like everybody's off and just like picking things, and then we just like go and we just start harvesting. And I'm doing it in a different way, but I didn't have that moment of awareness of like, pause, address the tree, recognize, ask, like that. I often like halfway through the foraging process or harvesting process would be like, shit, I'm sorry, was this okay? I just took a lot from you. Like, can we talk about this?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I harvest, I do like half a bucket. They weren't big buckets, but I like, you know, I get these berries, and then I'm like, I became aware of it. And then I was like, as I was harvesting, I was like, thanking and talking and just internally, but like just talking to the tree. And then his son came over and he was like, oh, he wants you to go over there. And so I finished where I was harvesting and I walked over, and he was like, oh, this is the one, it's loaded. And so I look and there's just all these berries. Like it was just, you know, clearly this one was full and lush and there was so much to take. And I just looked at it and I like got this really weird feeling of like this awareness of like, this is really gluttonous. Or so there was something about it that was just like, it was like she was just bursting, you know, but it was like not ours. I don't know how to describe it. It was just
I totally know what you mean.
Yeah. It was very much a felt experience and an internalized thing. And I was like, I looked at it and it was just, it was, I don't even know if it's a tree or a bush, but like the way the berries grow, it's like, it's just in clusters. It was just like these clusters. There was just so much. And I was like, no, I'm not going to harvest this. I'm not going to do this. I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. And he came over and like dumped his bucket into mine, and it was like so full. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. And so I just set the bucket down next to this bag of apples that the kids had picked. And I walked over and I was just very much following like the felt experience of like what I was feeling and the energetics and what I felt I was being told in my body to do. And so I just like, okay, I set it down. And then I walked over and the sun was shining and it was warm and beautiful. And I was like, maybe I'll just walk. And I could feel like sit down in the grass. Like I needed to sit down in the grass. So I was like, okay. And I'm aware, I was standing there holding the bucket and I was like, if I were by myself right now, I would immediately set down the bucket, walk over, sit down in the grass and just sit and close my eyes and be in the sun. And like, no question. I'm at the point now where I have that awareness in myself and that willingness if I'm by myself to do this. And I was like, this is a big risk in my mind. Like, it's not a big risk. Like, who's going to care if I put the bucket? Like, it's not an actual risk, I don't think. But I was aware of like, I am doing this and being witnessed and being watched. And this is totally me being myself, trusting myself, which is trusting source, which is trusting my divine feminine, which is trusting whatever guidance this is that I'm getting and these energetics. And like, this is all I want is to trust and live by this. And now I'm making that choice with my boyfriend right there watching, who has a totally different, not agenda, like that doesn't sound good, but like just a totally his own space, his own way of doing this, his own thoughts and feelings around it. And not at all to say that he doesn't like he has his way. And I know that he deeply, deeply loves and respects and cares for and is so grateful, like to the earth. I mean, I see that and it's just, it manifests in his own way. And so anyway, I was like, okay, so if I were by myself, I would absolutely do this, which means I have to absolutely do this regardless. And so I set the bucket down and I walk over and I sat in the grass and I like sat in the sun and I just started like apologizing and asking forgiveness and asking like, if I took beyond what was given to me, please forgive me. And I would just like went through this whole unexpected, spontaneous like prayer process, and felt like I was like, on the earth. And so I was just letting it like this, like as an offering, draining back into the earth, and then receiving from the sun and just being there. And it was just like this most beautiful experience. And very quickly, he stopped harvesting. And he was like, yeah, we've got enough between, like just, we had enough. And then he came over, and he just was like, I could feel that he was around, but he was quiet. And at one point he like kind of came up and like very gently touched my face, like as an indication, I don't know, of reaching out, like, I'm here. Are you ready? Can we, and I just like received it and continued to sit until I felt like I was complete. And then I opened my eyes, and he's standing there, and he reaches out his hand and he pulls me up, and we walk out, and we all leave together, and we go back in the car. And then when we get back to his house, we get out of the car, and I walk around, and he's standing there, and he just says something to me that was like, I don't even remember what it was, but it was basically like, I'm a force. Like there's like, he recognized, he saw something that maybe it was from my actions, maybe it was just me, I don't know what it was, but there was like something was given, like he gave to me something of what he was experiencing of me that felt in right balance with like who I had just expressed myself as, which is like who I want to be, and not asking me to explain myself, not questioning any of it, like nothing. It was just like, here I am, and then here he is offering this. And I was like, wow, I don't know, it was such a cool experience, and so validating to what your teacher told you to me.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful, I love that story. It's such a beautiful just story to hear. And because like foraging is like, for medicine is what I do. Like that's part of my business is that I make medicine, and everything I get at this point is foraged off of our property, or I grow it here. And it's an interesting thing because I get asked all the time by people about this whole thing of reciprocity with nature. And I just love how this ties into the whole divine feminine, because the nature is the divine feminine, right? Like this is like the earth mother. But I get asked this question all the time. Like people are like, and by Native American people and by, quote, white people, I hate that word. And I still haven't figured out a better word to use, but whatever, for everybody knows what I'm talking about. Like I get asked this by all kinds of people. And, my response is always the same, because people just assume, everybody at this point, like most people in the, I don't know what category to put these people in, but there's like a large portion of people who are seeing that there has been no reciprocity and wanting to change that, and particularly with foraging and medicine making and like living with the earth. So there's a large group of people that I interact with that really want to be like what you're saying. Like, I want to be this person. I want to have a reciprocity between me and the earth and all this. There's a large, a lot of people I come across like that. And like, how do I do that? And it is this thing of like what we were talking about with the divine feminine, of just like sitting back, like what you did, and just letting it unfold of what's going to happen. Because, people ask me, they're like, should I give tobacco? Should I take cornmeal? Should I sing a song? Whatever, like, what do I do? Like, do I say a prayer before I ask? And a lot of people don't understand like how Native Americans talk. So when a native person says like, you go to this tree and you say a prayer before you ask before you take, it might not necessarily mean I go to this tree and I say, hey, can I, whatever, in whatever way, hey, can I take some of your fruit? It really can be more of what you're talking about, the energetic exchange, right? And so I always tell people, I'm like, don't give something that means nothing to you. Don't give tobacco if tobacco is not part of your culture. Like, don't give cornmeal. Don't give a prayer if you don't pray, like if that's not your thing, right? Like, but if you're a person who loves nature and you love to go sit in nature and just to like feel joy and love in nature, and you just get like this really swelling. This is what happens to me. I just swell with so much love and joy when I'm in nature. Like that is part of an exchange too. Like you're cultivating that energy and you're giving that to the earth that you're laying on or whatever. And so it can be really intuitive, and it's just, I don't know, it's really cool because it does tie into this whole divine feminine of like how it unfolds. Like how reciprocity unfolds is that you just are a real person. You just are like living and being a spirit being, like having this human experience and just channeling, like doing it, letting it flow through you, like what's happening. So when I go out and I forage, I rarely say a prayer. Sometimes I go and I sing while I'm picking, but it's the same thing as what you're saying. Like I'll go to a place and I'm like, I'm not going to pick from that tree. I'm going to pick from this tree. And if you're in tune, if you're in the flow of nature, nature tells you where to go, right? Like it tells you like, this is the tree, just like it told you like, no, not this tree. But this one over here, like it tells you where to go. And that in itself is an invitation. You know, it's like when somebody comes to you and like a friend comes to you and they ask you for advice, or they like, you know, come to you and they express something to you. That's an invitation for you to respond, as opposed to you just going to somebody and being like, well, I think you should do this and da 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 da. Like that's, they didn't invite you. But if they come to you and they ask you, or like, well, this is what's happening, then that's an invitation for you to, you know, give your opinion or advice or whatever. It's like the same, like that's how reciprocity works. It is very flowy. And in situations that I've been in with people who are really in their head about it, it gets pretty awkward, like, you know, like really awkward of like, okay, I can feel that you're like really wanting this reciprocal relationship, but you're writing it down, you know, like, okay, I gave them da 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 da. Like one of our neighbors, started thinking this about them because they give us so much goat milk all the time. Like, you know, we're just drinking like gallons of goat milk every week. And, we don't need that much, but they have a ton. And so they're just giving it to us. So we were like trading produce with them or whatever. And it got to this really weird place. It's like, well, do you really, like, you have a garden, do you really need all this produce? Like, I don't want to be giving you, like, it becomes a burden if you give people too much produce, you know? And then also, like, I heard them say something like, well, my friend has had his cow on my land and I thought it was going to be for a short amount of time. And now he's bringing hay over. So it was like, I saw their interaction with other people where they had this exchange happen. And then they kind of like went back on it and were like, well, now I'm not feeling like I'm getting what I wanted out of it. And so it's like, sometimes those situations get really weird. And I think that it only gets weird whenever you get in your head about it, or you like start counting it. But if you, and that's why practicing with nature is so great, because I mean, I've literally gone out into nature. I remember one time in particular when I was in Ecuador, I went to this land and we were going to buy this land at the top of this mountain. It was amazing. There was a freaking waterfall. It was just like glorious. And I was just like, I'm going to live here and be the queen of the jungle. And I get under this waterfall and I'm just like, yes, I belong here. This is my place, like totally claiming it. And I looked up and a freaking log, like, you know, a huge log, like probably half the size of my body, fell on top of my head and like knocked me out almost. And I was like, okay, that was a very, like, nature will communicate with you. And it was like, get out of here. You don't belong here. And
it will communicate with you in direct relationship to how you,
to
the energy that you bring.
Exactly. And I left and I told Sam, I was like, you can buy that land, but I am not welcome there. Like, I'm not going to live there. And, you know, so it's like, yeah, it's just, when we get out of our head and just let it all of it, like let the divine feminine, let nature, let like life just kind of flow through us, then we always know the right thing to do. Like, it doesn't have to be this, you know, oh, I'm supposed to do this, or, oh, I should have done that, or whatever, which is, again, such an energy saver and such a time saver, because you don't have to worry about all of that mental crap.
Well, there's two like really key things that I want to bring up in response to that. And the first is about, I mean, what you're saying, it's like the difference between a transactional relationship and a conscious relationship, which you can have with a romantic partner, and you can have with any other person or any other entity. You can have it with the earth. And I think that's just part of like our programming and now deprogramming, unlearning, whatever process of like, we have this very concretized idea of an exchange. Like, you give me this, I give you this much money. They have equal worth and value. And the energetics of it are much more nuanced, and you have to be paying attention. Like, it's very simple and easy to just say like, this has this value, this has this value. It's an equal trade. It's an equal exchange. But then when you get into nature, it's like, nature doesn't work like that. Nature just is, and nature is fully abundant. And you can take as much as you want, and you will pay the consequences if you overtake. But it's like, it's not like, well, you can only have this much. It's like, no, actually, this tree is just fully loaded with fruit, and you could pick every single piece of fruit on that tree if you wanted to. And so, you know, people want to either have equal trades or know that they're giving back and equal to what they're being given, or they want to get more than they give because they want to like get the better deal, you know. So there's all these different ways that we have like worked with this concept of transaction. And so like, even unlearning this concept of transaction, you go from transaction to relationship, and those are two completely different things.
Yeah.
One is like black and white and cut and dry. And then the other is like, you have to actually be in relationship, relating to, communicating with, listening to, expressing. And I've never had an experience. I mean, I've had a lot of interactions communicating with nature, but I've never had an experience like the one I had today. And it was a really awesome experience to see, because I've like gone in and been like, well, I want to harvest the right piece or the right one, or the, you know, the right branch or the right fruit, or, you know, and like, I'll listen and I'll tune in and I can feel like, oh, maybe not that one. Oh, maybe this one. And it's like thinking about like going apple picking and like why I would gravitate towards one apple versus another apple. Right. And, you know, there's lots of like ego reasons why you're like, oh, that one's big and it looks perfect. And there's, you know, it's going to be crisp and juicy. And like, that one is too small, or, you know, whatever. Like, there's those ways. But then there's also like the subtle energetics, which I always pay attention to. But this was like totally next level for me, because it wasn't intended or anticipated. I was just like, my intention in myself has been to be open and aware and listening, like deeply listening and paying attention. And so because I was willing to listen and then willing to respond, which is part of being in relationship, is responding, I was able to have that experience, which leads me to the next like really critical piece I think that needs to be addressed here, which is that I think one of the reasons, probably one of the biggest reasons that people struggle so much with this, is because we have this ingrained, deeply ingrained belief that we are either wrong or bad or deeply flawed in some way, undeserving and disconnected from nature, that we are not of it and not allowed to be in relationship to it. And I think, I mean, not to get like controversial and political and whatever around this, but just the way that, you know, we have differentiated between like indigenous people and white people, or like differentiated groups of people. And some of those people have a right to relate to the earth, and some of those people don't, because some of those people took over or whatever. And it's like, but actually, ultimately, all of us are better off if we all are in direct relationship with the earth. And we are all actually made up of the earth, whether we want to think that or not.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of us, specifically in certain demographics, carry a belief that we don't deserve this. We have no right to it. We are separate from it and don't know how. And I certainly personally carried that belief for a long time, like probably the first 33 years of my life. And there was like a period in there, a few years, where I had, you know, started working on farms and was like more involved with plants than I'd ever been, but it was still very much like not in relationship in the way that I am now. That's really only begun in the last 2 years. And so what I've come to realize or experience, I mean, very recently, even like in the last month, I think, is the awareness. Like I had it today when I sort of realized all of a sudden, like, oh God, I'm not supposed to be harvesting this. And then it made me think like, should I not have harvested any? Did I do wrong by being here? Should I not have come? Should I have said something for, and like, I didn't like freak out about it, but it just immediately triggered that series of thoughts that I had somehow done something wrong, done something I shouldn't have, taken advantage of, abused the privilege or whatever it is. And so then when I set the bucket down and I went and just sat cross-legged in the grass in the sun, the spontaneous prayer that arose was related to that. But I also realized, like, in that process, that my sitting there and offering that prayer, asking for forgiveness, was actually an offering of reciprocity and writing the balance and writing the relationship. And so whether I took too many berries or not became moot at that point, because I righted the balance and the relationship with nature in that moment for my past actions. And I've experienced that, like, in the last few weeks. I've been going through a lot of energetic shifts, and like pretty much all of last week I was unable to do anything for most of the day but like knit and then lay in the grass in the sun. Like my energy was just so like very slow, very still, very inward. Like I didn't want to interact with anybody. I didn't want to be doing anything. And so I had a lot of days where for like a couple hours I was laying out in my yard in the sun, like on my back at first and then face down, like my face just in the earth and body splayed out. And it was kind of fun. I had this awareness of feeling of like, I'm trying to hug her, but I can't hug her because she's so big. You know? It just felt really nice. But I'm realizing like getting my whole body on the earth, which is something this woman wrote this book called, what's it called? Oh shoot. I think it's called Knowing. Her name's Erin Eugwin McMorrow, something like that. She was on the Ceremony Circles podcast recently, if you're interested. But she was talking about that, about this, like what she does, because I've always gone out and put my bare feet in the grass, and like it feels good, but it's not like enough. It takes too long and it doesn't quite give me the connection or the release or whatever I'm looking for. So putting my full body on the earth, and immediately I feel something, and then I can like let my body release into the earth. And then what I have felt and noticed in these last couple of weeks is it's like this, it's an energetic exchange. Like I feel like I'm releasing and I'm draining and I'm clearing out and I'm letting all this stuff go back into the earth, and I'm also receiving from the earth, but that in the act of releasing what I have in me that needs to release and drain out, it's also an offering to her, because she can take that and do whatever she wants with it. I was like, I would really release it with the thought of like, please take this and turn this into light, or I know you will take this and transmute it and grow something new and beautiful from this. So it's like my concept may be like, oh, I have all this negative energy, or I don't have anything to offer, whatever. But like if everything that we have, we can offer. And it's like back to the 100% responsibility thing. Like nobody else is responsible for how we receive something and what we do with it. Like one man's trash is another man's treasure. Like, yeah, I can offer my junk and my negativity, but she will take it and grow beauty out of it. Yeah. And so I'm giving of myself to her, and I'm offering my presence and my connection to her. And that is a gift, and that is an offering in reciprocity.
Yeah. It's interesting because I used to really trip out on this whole thing for a few years, because when I was like in my hardcore radical feminist time, because I would hear people be like, I remember one time, this particular incident, there was a man who was a friend of my partner's, and he said something, I don't remember what we were talking about, but it was like something about, our emotional baggage or whatever. And he's like, yeah, you just got to give it back to the earth or whatever, and like let the earth deal with it or whatever. And I was just like, you know what, as a woman and as a mother, like I am offended by that, because women get dumped on all the time. And I was just like so pissed. And so for like a few years, I was like riding that high horse of like, yeah, like of course people want to dump on the earth, like dump everything on the earth. Like it's the divine feminine. Like they just want to dump and all this. But now, and like hearing what you're saying, like there are so many women I know who capture their menstrual blood and give it to the earth. Right. And there are so many people I know who would see that in that way of like, oh, like you're dumping your blood on the earth. Like that's gross. Like your blood is gross. Like you could see it from that perspective as well. But for these women, it's very much a gift. Like the blood of my life, I'm giving to you, And so you can see that in these two different ways. And yeah, it very much is like, it can be giving this stuff to the earth can be very much a gift. And who's to like, yeah, I love that. And one man's trash is another man's treasure or whatever. Like, it totally true. Like, we have no idea. I mean, we just have no idea about so many things, but we have no idea what the impact of that is. We have no idea what we like. I mean, I've experienced this so many times in my life because I just say whatever the hell I want to say all the time. And a lot of times I leave a situation, I'm like, oh man, I kind of made an ass of myself or whatever, you know, I hope I didn't look too stupid. And then I'll have somebody come back to me and be like, wow, hearing you say that was like so liberating. I remember this happened between you and I when I told you the first time I wanted to throw my baby against the wall when we both had little kids. And you were just like, oh my God, like other people feel that way. And I hear that so many times from women. They're just like, yes. And now I'm in this women's group and it's all about like postpartum time and all this stuff, this training that we're doing. And I posted that in there. I was like, yeah, because people, you can't go around telling people that you want to slam your baby into the wall because then they'll call DHS or whatever. And all these women were just like, oh my God, like, yes, da, 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 like just so validating for them. So you have no idea what you're offering, how it's going to be received, or, and it's not, like you said, it's not up to us to even know that. Like, it's up to us to just live like real, like be real, like live it out, and have the experience in a, I don't know, authentic or real or fluid way. Like, I always think of it as like a flow, like just let it flow out. And you know, it's like when we bring our truth to somebody and we can oftentimes get like caught in the thing of like, well, how are they going to receive it? And da, 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 da. This is what I hate about nonviolent communication. Like, because it's like, you can get into this thing of like spinning out and being like, okay, I have to word this perfectly because I don't want to hurt this person and da, 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 da. And like, what I love about Brad Blanton and Radical Honesty is he's just like, fucking say that shit. Like, in those workshops, they cuss so much. They're just like, fucking piss me off. Like, just like yelling at each other, but they feel so good afterwards because they got it out. And then they, you know, if there's repair that needs to happen, you do the repair. But like, you know, I'm not just saying you just like go and curse somebody out or whatever, but like, you just express what needs to be expressed and then stay there for whatever, you know, like you can't just like bounce. But yeah, so we just have no idea how things are going to be received, and it's just our job to like let it flow. And yeah,
Well, it's like it's an inflated, you know, it's the way that control is like actually your inflated ego, where you're trying to, you know, saying, oh, I don't want to offend this person, but you're actually trying to control their experience, which is about you and not about them. And so if you just own like your role in the relationship, then things shift. And so like having, you know, it's taking responsibility for things that aren't your responsibility. And and thinking like yeah, there's such a bigger picture around everything that we can't see, and that a lot of us don't consciously experience, and then some of us do to varying degrees. But like in the thing about reciprocity with the earth, you know, if you're trying to get like the right relationship, like that really is about the person and about their ego stories and like what kind of outcome they want to control and have, versus a surrendering to what is and the underlying currents and truth of what's actually taking place.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good stopping point for the day. Reciprocity and
Yeah.
letting it flow. Thank you for listening to this conversation between women, and we will be back with you in another month, I guess, or so.